The night is quiet, but the land itself seems to whisper secrets. Vast plains stretch out under a pale moon, and in the middle of nowhere stand circles of stone, silent, unmoving, yet undeniably deliberate. They are older than memory, older than the stories passed down through generations, and yet here they remain, refusing to be forgotten. Imagine stumbling upon these formations for the first time. Perfectly aligned, carved with precision, they do not seem like the random arrangements of primitive hands. Instead, they appear almost mathematical, as if some ancient intelligence left behind a code waiting to be deciphered. Mainstream history tells us that such structures should not exist here, not at this time, not built by the people who lived in these lands. And yet, there they are, mocking the timelines we cling to. What purpose did they serve? Were they places of worship? Astronomical observatories? Or perhaps something even more unsettling, gateways of power, markers left by civilizations that official history refuses to acknowledge. For centuries, archaeologists, explorers, and even mystics have stood before these stones and asked the same question: who built them, and why? But the answers never come easily. Instead, the mystery only deepens, pulling us into a world where myth and fact blur together, where every discovery feels like a carefully buried secret finally clawing its way back into the light. Tonight, we begin that journey. For centuries, the history of Africa has been written not in ink, but in silence. When we think of ancient civilizations, our minds almost instinctively travel to Egypt, Greece, or Mesopotamia. Yet the vast expanse of Africa, stretching across deserts, jungles, and savannas, holds secrets just as profound, perhaps even more enigmatic. Unlike the civilizations of Europe and the Middle East, much of Africa's past was not preserved on parchment or carved into stone tablets. Instead, it lived within the voices of its people, passed down through song, through story, through memory. This oral tradition was powerful, but fragile. Over time, wars, colonization, and the erosion of cultural continuity stripped much of it away, leaving behind fragments, whispers of forgotten kingdoms and cryptic monuments scattered across the land. Mainstream archaeology offers a cautious interpretation of these remnants. The mysterious stone circles dotting regions like Senegal and Gambia, for instance, are often dismissed as nothing more than burial markers or ritual grounds. According to the scientific consensus, they belong to communities that left little else behind, isolated pockets of ancient peoples who lacked the complexity of the Great Pyramid builders or the astronomer priests of Babylon. In this view, Africa's stone monuments are fascinating, yes, but ultimately provincial, a local curiosity, not a missing piece of world history. But outside the walls of academia, another narrative has taken shape. Researchers who look beyond the conventional lens point to the uncanny precision and alignment of certain sites, suggesting that these structures might have been more than just burial grounds. Could they have functioned as astronomical observatories, measuring the passage of seasons, tracking the movements of the stars, perhaps even encoding forgotten knowledge of the cosmos? Some of these stone formations seem to align with solstices and equinoxes in ways too deliberate to be dismissed as coincidence. The possibility arises that long before Stonehenge rose in Britain, or the great ziggurats of Sumer reached toward the sky, African civilizations had already mapped the heavens. This clash, between the archaeologist's modest interpretation and the mystic's daring speculation, creates a tension that fuels endless debate. To skeptics, the lack of written records or elaborate ruins is proof that Africa's ancient peoples could not have reached such heights of sophistication. But to others, the absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. After all, how many times has history surprised us? The once-lost city of Great Zimbabwe was, for decades, dismissed by colonial scholars as too advanced to have been built by Africans, until irrefutable proof revealed otherwise. Could the same prejudice still cloud our understanding today? Africa's unwritten past sits like a riddle, inviting us deeper into its shadows. Are the scattered stones simply graves of forgotten villagers, or markers of a cosmic science that challenges our entire understanding of history? The answer, perhaps, lies in listening not only to the silence of the stones but to the echoes that surround them, the myths, the legends, the stories that have endured. For it is within these that the forgotten voices of Africa might still be speaking, waiting for us to hear. To understand the allure of these stone circles, we must walk among them, imagining ourselves stepping into a landscape where time itself seems to have paused. Across vast plains in the Gambia and Senegal, thousands of weathered megaliths rise from the red earth, their silent forms casting long shadows as the sun slips low on the horizon. The Senegambian stone circles, perhaps the most famous of these sites, stretch for hundreds of kilometers. Over 1,000 circles have been documented, containing tens of thousands of individual stones. Yet, despite this immense scale, the layout is anything but random. The builders showed astonishing precision, carving and arranging basalt pillars into near-perfect rings, some measuring up to 20 meters across. Each stone, towering 2 to 3 meters in height and weighing several tons, was carefully shaped and positioned, suggesting a guiding plan rather than improvisation. As you enter one of these circles, a strange feeling arises. The air feels heavier, as though the weight of centuries presses down upon you. The stones stand like silent guardians, aligned with deliberate entrances, often oriented toward the rising or setting sun. Many circles contain central pillars, solitary markers that might have served as focal points for rituals, sacrifices, or celestial observations. Others contain burial mounds, where human remains, pottery, and iron objects have been unearthed, traces of people whose names and stories have long been erased. Were these circles vast necropolises, monuments to the dead, or theaters for ceremonies that brought entire communities together under starlit skies? The craftsmanship raises further questions. Basalt, the dominant stone used, is incredibly hard. To shape it into smooth, cylindrical pillars without iron tools, if indeed these circles predate widespread ironworking, would have required unimaginable skill and perseverance. Each stone had to be quarried, carved, transported, and raised upright, often kilometers away from its source. How could communities with supposedly simple technology achieve such monumental feats? Archaeologists suggest coordinated labor, specialized artisans, and generations of accumulated knowledge. Yet even this explanation struggles to capture the grandeur of what lies before us. Equally fascinating is the repetition. Across hundreds of sites, the same circular patterns appear again and again, with consistent diameters, entrances, and arrangements. This uniformity hints at a shared cultural blueprint, a set of rules or beliefs followed faithfully across centuries. It is as though an invisible handbook dictated the measurements, ensuring every circle spoke the same language. What was the significance of the circle itself? Universally, circles have symbolized eternity, unity, and the heavens above. Could these builders have been encoding cosmic truths, creating physical reflections of celestial cycles? Or were they, as some local traditions whisper, establishing portals, gateways where the living and the dead, the human and the divine, could commune? Yet, despite all we know, the stones refuse to give up their final secrets. Some researchers argue they were simply monumental cemeteries, built by settled communities to honor their ancestors. Others see them as calendars, aligned with solstices and equinoxes, used to track the passage of seasons. And still others look deeper, wondering if they represent something far stranger, traces of a forgotten civilization, whose knowledge of geometry, astronomy, and engineering far exceeded what mainstream history is willing to admit. Standing within these circles, surrounded by their geometric silence, it is hard not to feel the pull of that mystery. The sheer scale, the repeating patterns, and the hidden purpose behind them make one thing clear: these are not mere piles of stones. They are messages from the past, carved into the earth itself, demanding that we listen, even if the language has long been lost. The circles themselves are the riddle, their presence both undeniable and unexplainable, their meaning forever balanced between history and myth. This section plunges into the heart of one of the most captivating mysteries, the technology and scientific understanding that might have been available to ancient civilizations. Viewers are guided through a narrative that oscillates between established archaeology and the whisper of lost knowledge. Imagine the camera slowly gliding across megalithic walls where stones weighing hundreds of tons sit so precisely that a human hair cannot fit between them. Traditional explanations suggest the use of primitive tools, chisels, ropes, manpower, and a mastery of patience. Yet as the story unfolds, the contrast emerges. How could such tools achieve feats that modern engineers would struggle to replicate without cranes, diamond-cut saws, and computer precision? The script builds tension by comparing these enigmatic structures to iconic sites such as Stonehenge, Nabta Playa, and Great Zimbabwe, each carrying its own puzzle pieces. Stonehenge, with its astronomical alignments, suggests a grasp of celestial cycles far beyond what we would expect from Neolithic farmers. Nabta Playa in the Egyptian desert, older still, reveals a prehistoric calendar system etched into the landscape. Was this simply survival-driven observation of the stars, or does it hint at a more advanced cosmological knowledge passed down from a forgotten culture? Great Zimbabwe, with its towering stone enclosures built without mortar, demonstrates architectural skill but also raises questions. Why do similar techniques appear across continents, in civilizations that supposedly never interacted? As the section progresses, the narrative introduces theories that challenge conventional wisdom. Could lost metallurgy techniques have allowed for more precise cutting of stone? Some fringe researchers suggest sound-based movement, the possibility that resonance and vibration were harnessed to move massive blocks. The story does not claim answers but carefully walks the tightrope between skepticism and open-minded curiosity. Viewers are asked to picture a forgotten toolkit, knowledge not etched into surviving records but embedded in the structures themselves. To heighten the drama, the script then brings in the voices of scientists and skeptics. Archaeologists argue for patience, ingenuity, and communal effort, reminding us that underestimating ancient people is a common trap. Yet the counterpoint refuses to fade. Why does the precision often appear beyond what brute force alone could achieve? Why do so many myths across cultures speak of gods, giants, or star travelers who taught humanity these skills? The section uses these contradictions to keep the audience suspended in a state of wonder, always leaning forward for what comes next. Finally, the section closes with a cinematic transition. The narration suggests that perhaps these megaliths were more than just functional. They may have been encoded with knowledge, a legacy designed to withstand the erosion of time and memory. Were they calendars, energy centers, or messages to the future? The answer remains elusive, but the question itself is the hook that draws us deeper into the labyrinth of mystery. With every possibility, the viewer is left straddling two worlds, one grounded in soil, sweat, and stone, the other whispering of an inheritance from civilizations we no longer remember. As night falls, the silent stones seem to awaken under the stars. For centuries, observers have speculated whether these circles were designed with the heavens in mind. Were they mere gathering sites, or did they function as ancient observatories, bridging the earthly and the celestial? Scholars point out that some stone circles align precisely with sunrise on the solstice, while others point toward constellations such as Orion or Sirius, stars that were revered across multiple ancient cultures. This precision challenges the idea of randomness, suggesting an advanced awareness of astronomy long before written records. Imagine a community gathering at dawn, the first ray of light slicing across the stones exactly where their ancestors intended. Yet skeptics caution against overinterpretation. They argue that with so many stones scattered across vast landscapes, some alignments will naturally appear coincidental. According to this view, what modern researchers interpret as intentional may have been accidental, shapes born from ritual, not science. But then, how do we explain the repeated patterns, where circles hundreds of miles apart share the same astronomical orientations? Was there a hidden system of knowledge, passed down through oral tradition, that connected these seemingly isolated cultures? The debate grows deeper when we consider myths. Many traditions speak of sky beings, or star teachers, who descended to impart wisdom. Could the builders have been marking the descent points of their gods, or creating a sacred calendar that merged Earth with cosmos? Each possibility adds another layer of wonder, a puzzle where myth and measurement intertwine. As we move further, the question remains, were these circles primitive monuments, or were they silent instruments tracking the eternal dance of stars? The answer is suspended between skepticism and awe, inviting us to gaze upward, just as the builders once did, and wonder what truths the night sky still holds. Across the vast landscapes where these stone circles and ancient sites still stand, whispers of myth and legend continue to echo. Local communities, particularly in Africa, have passed down stories that attribute these circles to supernatural builders, spirits, giants, or even the people before time, a mysterious race believed to have vanished before recorded history. Elders often speak of ancestors who held ceremonies in these circles, claiming the stones themselves are alive, humming with energy at night, or aligned to the paths of spirits crossing between worlds. Some myths portray the circles as gateways, thresholds where the living could communicate with the dead or the gods. These oral traditions, though dismissed by many Western scholars as superstition, often preserve fragments of truth that archaeology alone cannot explain. Through a cinematic lens, this section delves into the tension between folklore and science. On one side, the raw, poetic memory of ancient voices that frame these sites as sacred and otherworldly; on the other, the modern insistence on empirical evidence, carbon dating, and material proof. By weaving these narratives together, the story becomes richer. Viewers are invited to imagine what ancient builders might have intended, not just in stone, but in spirit. Did they encode celestial knowledge within myth? Were rituals performed here truly a way to connect with something beyond human comprehension? As the section unfolds, the viewer is guided into an almost dreamlike space where storytelling takes the lead. Each myth feels like a candle in the dark, illuminating fragments of lost history. We examine how oral traditions may carry memories of real events, mass migrations, celestial phenomena, or even encounters with unknown civilizations, wrapped in layers of metaphor. The contrast is sharpened by showing how academic voices tend to strip these stories of their mystical essence, reducing them to primitive explanations, while the people living near these circles see them as living heritage that speaks to human origins. By the end of this section, the audience is left with a lingering sense of wonder. Could these legends be more than symbolic tales? Could they represent encrypted records of ancient knowledge, waiting for us to listen in ways beyond science? The mystery deepens, setting the stage for the exploration of lost civilizations and forbidden knowledge in the following sections. For centuries, knowledge has been shaped not just by discovery but by silence. The stone circles that dot remote landscapes should, by any measure, command the same respect and fascination as Stonehenge or Göbekli Tepe. Yet they remain footnotes in archaeological journals, rarely mentioned in documentaries or textbooks. This silence is not accidental, it reflects a deeper pattern in how history is told, and more importantly, in what is left untold. When colonial archaeologists first encountered these circles, they often dismissed them as primitive works, the product of wandering tribes without architectural skill or cosmological insight. Their reports carried an undertone of condescension, suggesting that true sophistication belonged only to the ancient civilizations of Europe or the Near East. Over time, this dismissal hardened into academic neglect. Generations of scholars simply repeated the same assumptions, until the circles themselves faded into obscurity. But here lies the mystery: how could such massive undertakings, requiring organization, vision, and astronomical precision, have been created by cultures supposedly without advanced knowledge? The contradiction is glaring, and it exposes the fragile scaffolding of accepted history. The mainstream narrative celebrates monuments that fit neatly into the linear story of human progress, while quietly ignoring those that suggest an older, more widespread network of wisdom. Even today, researchers who challenge this silence face resistance. Funding is scarce, academic journals are reluctant, and entire institutions seem unwilling to acknowledge evidence that disrupts their frameworks. The question emerges: why? Is it simply academic inertia, the reluctance to revise textbooks? Or is it something deeper, a subtle effort to maintain a Eurocentric timeline that places civilization in only a handful of locations, while erasing the achievements of others? Whispers of conspiracy inevitably arise. Could there be an intentional suppression of knowledge, designed to prevent us from questioning the very foundations of our history? If ancient cultures across continents were building similar stone circles, aligned with the heavens, then perhaps humanity's story is not one of isolated sparks of brilliance, but of a shared, interconnected wisdom stretching far back into the forgotten past. Accepting that would mean rethinking not just archaeology, but our place in the universe. And so the silence continues, as though the stones themselves are waiting for us to listen. Their mystery grows with every year they remain unstudied, with every unanswered question about their origin, purpose, and creators. The audience is left to wonder, are we ignoring these circles because they truly have nothing to say, or because we fear what they might reveal about a history far older, far stranger, and far less controllable than we've been led to believe? At this stage in the script, we transition into the realm of speculation, where imagination and mystery entwine. The established archaeological record offers explanations rooted in logic and science, but there are gaps so wide that speculation almost feels inevitable. This section immerses the audience in the more controversial, almost forbidden interpretations that have persisted through generations of seekers. We begin with the idea of a lost civilization, something akin to Atlantis, that may have once flourished with knowledge far beyond what history allows. Whispers of such a society often emerge when scholars find architectural feats that seem to defy the tools and methods of their supposed builders. Could these structures be remnants of a forgotten age, one that slipped beneath the waves or was consumed by global catastrophe, leaving only fragments for us to interpret? From there, the script takes a darker and stranger turn. Some argue that humanity was not alone in its earliest chapters, that visitors from beyond our world, or even beyond our dimension, played a role in shaping our path. The alignment of ancient monuments with celestial bodies, the mathematical precision in seemingly primitive eras, and the sudden leaps in human development are offered as signs. These ideas have often been dismissed as pseudo-history, yet they refuse to vanish. The possibility lingers like a shadow: what if our ancestors were guided, taught, or even ruled by something, or someone, not entirely human? And then, perhaps the most unsettling of all theories, we explore the notion that survivors of an ancient cataclysm encoded their warnings into stone. This perspective reframes the mysteries not as monuments of worship or mere astronomical tools, but as urgent messages carved into permanence. Every alignment, every carving, every inexplicable anomaly could be read not as art or ritual but as a desperate attempt to preserve knowledge for a future humanity that might one day face the same devastation. If so, are we deciphering their symbols too late, or just in time? By weaving these possibilities together, the section does not claim certainty. Instead, it heightens the tension between fact and speculation. Each theory stretches plausibility in different directions, and yet each holds a haunting element of possibility. None can explain everything, but none can be entirely dismissed. That is the enduring power of the mystery. It survives precisely because it resists resolution. This segment leaves the audience suspended between wonder and unease, where every answer seems to open into deeper questions. The line between myth and science grows thin, and the listener is invited to lean forward, to question, and to imagine. It is in this space, half shadow, half light, that the story finds its most hypnotic pull, keeping curiosity alive as we prepare to lead into the closing revelations. Across the world, scattered like pieces of a forgotten puzzle, stand monuments that echo the same enigma, massive stones arranged with purpose, aligned to the stars, whispering secrets of civilizations long gone. Stonehenge in England, with its silent sentinels of weathered rock, continues to inspire speculation about whether it was a temple, a calendar, or a portal to another realm. In France, the Karnak stones stretch in endless rows, thousands of granite monoliths aligned with a precision that feels almost military, yet their function remains hidden. Journey south into the Sahara, and at Nabta Playa in Egypt, we find an ancient stone circle that predates Stonehenge by millennia, carefully oriented to mark the summer solstice. And across the Atlantic, high in the mountains of South America, megaliths at Sacsayhuaman and Tiwanaku challenge our very understanding of stoneworking, as if created by hands that wielded knowledge beyond their time. When these sites are viewed in isolation, they seem like curiosities of local cultures. But when connected in a broader narrative, they suggest something far greater, a shared language of stone, a blueprint carried across continents. Were these cultures independently discovering the same cosmic truths, or were they fragments of a once united world? Some archaeologists argue coincidence, that human beings everywhere simply looked upward at the same stars and drew similar conclusions. Yet, the sheer precision, the repeating patterns, and the persistence of these alignments hint at a more profound mystery. How could societies separated by oceans and centuries converge on the same architectural principles? Were these echoes of contact, or the fingerprints of a knowledge older than recorded history? Science insists on caution, pointing to migration patterns, trade routes, and convergent development as explanations. Myth, however, tells another story. Legends across cultures speak of the first teachers, beings who descended from the heavens or rose from the seas to impart wisdom. In Mesoamerica, Quetzalcoatl is remembered as the feathered serpent who brought knowledge of astronomy and architecture. In ancient Mesopotamia, the Apkallu were described as semi-divine sages who taught humankind the skills of civilization. The Dogon of West Africa recall the Namo, beings from the Sirius star system, who gave their ancestors sacred wisdom. Could it be that these myths encode memories of a shared origin, one that transcends geography? The contrast between scientific skepticism and mythic tradition creates a haunting tension. Science tells us there is no evidence of global contact in the Neolithic age, while myth insists there was. Perhaps the truth lies somewhere in between, that fragments of knowledge traveled further and earlier than we currently believe, and that oral traditions preserved what archaeology has yet to uncover. As we weave these threads together, the image of a forgotten global network comes into focus, one in which Africa was not on the periphery but at the very heart. It may be that the stone circles of Africa, like Nabta Playa, are not isolated relics but the opening chapter of a much larger, interconnected story of human origins. And so, the question lingers, were these stones placed by separate hands following the same instincts, or were they guided by a hidden blueprint, a code passed down from a world we have long forgotten? The final section opens with a slow return to the atmospheric imagery introduced at the start, the vast silence of the stones under the African skies. The camera lingers on their shapes against the twilight horizon, the sense of age and mystery palpable in every frame. Rather than offering tidy answers, this conclusion deepens the enigma. The audience is reminded that these circles have stood for thousands of years, older than empires, older than most written records, carrying with them the weight of forgotten worlds. We explore the haunting possibility that these structures are not just remnants of ritual or astronomy, but fragments of a larger, untold story of humanity. If they were aligned to the heavens, why was this knowledge lost? If they marked the dead, what worldview did those ancestors hold that made stone their eternal language? Each question is presented not as a dead end, but as a door left ajar, inviting the listener to imagine. The narration then shifts tone. What if these stones are not only about the past, but about the future? Perhaps they are a reminder that civilizations rise and vanish, leaving behind only cryptic traces. Just as we peer into their mysteries today, what will our descendants make of the ruins of our world thousands of years from now? The parallel creates a moment of reflection, a bridge between ancient builders and modern viewers, uniting both under the same cosmic curiosity. The script ends not with certainty, but with a lingering sense of awe. The stone circles remain, timeless guardians of forgotten wisdom, whispering to anyone willing to listen. The final words encourage the audience to carry the mystery with them, to let the questions echo in their minds long after the video ends. In true cinematic fashion, the story closes with a haunting thought: perhaps these circles were never meant to be solved, but to remind us that history itself is a puzzle, one that is far larger, stranger, and more extraordinary than we dare to imagine.